the place of poetry, the the contrast, you framed it in terms of public and private, poetry and public life and their relationship. You mentioned this in your last article,
The Superman one.
the Superman article, and you said something about the necessity of eliminating poetry
Yes.
for this brave new regime that what can you discuss that, this business of eliminating poetry, or the importance of poetry to private life? And
Yeah. Well, the article opens with this the reference to Pasternak. So the private life is dead for the socialist dream. To establish the socialist dream, you have to cut off the bond, or any bond, between man in his intimacy and divine transcendence. However, you want to then represent that transcendence. So man has to be cut off from transcendent roots, and then he can be hooked onto the new dream, the new ideology, enter into this brave new world, and dedicate himself entirely to the realization of an ideal. And the universality of the group is supposed to vouch for the truth value of the ideal. So if we're all in it together, if we're all in it together, then it must be the right way.
The Kantian business of making sure that a principle can be universalized, or that a law can be universalized, is it related to that? Because at
Clearly,
that point,
the Kantian new society is a society for everyone, including and perhaps even especially devils. Even a devil can follow rules and regulations.
Right.
But now, if it's not mathematically valid for everyone, maybe we can find a way to show that anyone who doesn't fit is just bad, or is following radical evil, which is to say, this stepping outside and away from this new ideal, the new project. It does remind one a bit of Augustine's two ways, the way of two ways to understand human life and politics. One way towards God, and the other way. But of course, it's not towards God as as being, as a fundamental. This is about an as if. This is about an ideal to be realized, hic et nunc, or anyway, progressively. This is a shadow, a corrupt shadow of the earlier vision. And it demands much more of us, much more demanding, demands everything, body and soul. And in fact, as Pasternak showed, and he knew something about communism, as did his other compatriote, Dostoevsky, and others. I mean, Solzhenitsyn, of course, but they understood by socialism this conception, but also this way of life, on account of which man is supposed to be cut off from old views in order to be completely consecrated to the new one.
But isn't there also public poetry?
Yeah, but there is a soul of poetry, and poetry is, par excellence, it's intimacy. Otherwise, we're speaking about propaganda. We're speaking about communism's appropriation of poets to serve an ideological agenda. Here we're speaking about poetry as saving us from that, from our being manipulated, from our being reduced to means precisely of this dream.
But then poetry then is let's say, a mode of expression, but it can be exploited for good or for evil.
I wouldn't even speak about it as an expression, frankly. I would say you could even say a way of life, but I mean, it is a
but then
an adventure,
yeah, but because to me this brings us up against this maybe goes in takes the conversation in a slightly different direction, but it for me it evokes the problem of contemporary art, where art has been redefined as all about meaning and politics, and any question of techne has been completely put aside. And because of that,
okay,
what isn't either propaganda or things that are completely fake, which can be justified by the idea that each person is a Heideggerian monad generating his own cosmos and his own meaning, that can then be labeled art. So in view of that problem, there might be a problem of definition of words when we talk about poetry in this way. It might need a more careful definition because you might have a great I don't know, somebody, poetry becomes propaganda, or it's something intimate and true. So, but isn't it at the same time a technique?
Well, first of all, the dichotomy between the individual, what we call today individual, and the society. Yeah, I think this is has become an obsession in the modern world, properly because of the conception of the human that is given. I'm working on this in this new article. I'm unpacking this problem, but I could say a few words on this, to the effect that we begin from what can be shown to be an erroneous view of man, or a bad anthropology, on account of which man is originally apolitical. He's on his own. And then he's confronted with the group, the society, or he's compelled to join the group, because otherwise he'd be left in the too vulnerable and facing the continuous threat of violent death. So from there, you have this dichotomy in art as well. Should it be my personal feelings versus the public spirited commitment, or in fact the ideal all right, goes back to Superman. Is it private feelings? So art now is private expression, or should I be serving the higher, the greater, maybe good of the society? No, I think this is a very, very modern dilemma, and we have to, in order to escape the perplexity that it engenders, we would need to transcend it and go back to what it conceals.
Is what it conceals, is the higher transcendent public thing not a smokescreen that obscures reality, and isn't reality the true, I don't know, higher thing?
What
Is that what you
art is
mean?
all about?
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, because it isn't
sure.
it in the sense that we ourselves are part of reality, that our sentiments and so on our capacity to think and so on is something that's inherent in the cosmos, in the natural world.
Fair enough, but then again, somebody might raise the question, which one is to be preeminent over the other? Is it your feelings or the social demands? Huh?
Right, but if we orient ourselves by the idea of reality, however obscure that might be,
Okay.
doesn't that reconcile the private with the public, or the individual with the greater?
Well, take Hegel, for example, yeah? I mean, clearly he raises this issue. I mean, anybody who is in any way philosophical, yeah, who is not completely stupid, yeah, will see that there has to be a playing out of this tension between the feelings, yeah. I mean, in the modern world, at any rate, the feelings and the social demands, and for Hegel, well, the feelings clearly have to be sacrificed, as with Kant, but recovered, somehow recovered, so transformed, so burned as a phoenix, as it were, and they kind of reappear in this new society, enlightened society, which is the society that has incarnated everything that is noble. Well, it's not happening
Because
now, that's for sure.
but Hegel's idea is that the society has reached, modern Western society in the 19th century has reached the unsurpassable level of rationality and justice that society can reach.
I would say that it has reached it in Hegel.
In Hegel.
In Hegel himself.
In Hegel. Yeah.
That Geist is speaking in Hegel. But that, and that the society that he's in is a spokesperson somehow for a society that is to come. So it's not fully, Geist is not fully realized in his Germany or his Prussia, whatever it will, but it's sort of the announcement. It announces, it's a sign of a coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's the beginning. Well, it's of a new stage of realization, self-realization.
Yeah, the owl of Minerva is taking flight in that circumstance.
Yeah,
he has this prestigious professorial position in a in a university of that society, and therefore, it announces what's coming, but something went seriously wrong,
Eh,
with,
you could say
with
so.
the idea.
You could say so. You could be still justifying it, just as people justify Trotsky or communism by saying that Stalinism is corruption. But you know, others would say that Stalin is a necessary
Right. So
outcome.
so 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 Marco, what's the solution? I mean, if
Yeah.
if if this whole Western progress has landed us in this incredible mess, which we have the privilege or the punishment to be actually living through at this moment,
Hmm. Hmm.
which I'll just add. I mean, this is the theme of my channel, but in the '60s the when art tipped over into contemporary art, this for me is the model of what's happening now. And it's now happening in every aspect of society. In art, it didn't matter because art, it doesn't hurt anybody if pretty paintings aren't being made anymore. Bridges don't collapse. But it's the same process. It's a complete takeover by God as man, who is going to remodel everything into our we're going beyond nature. We're going to seize a hold of our actual uh, physical evolutionary processes. We're going to start producing ourselves with bigger brains and wings and tails and so on. And uh, this man as creator. But that's an aside. I think that's what we're in, and how do we get out of it?
Closely related to this um, is the what I would call the anthropological problem of the logos. Um, is it the case that man is primarily out for answers, or is he originally and thus primarily out for questions? When my children and anybody's children today go to school, they are told in many different ways that the human being has evolved from monkeys and that monkeys communicate, we communicate, bees communicate, and we all have various modes of communication. So even the earlier model of the tree of evolution, Darwinian, or similar ones, where the human being stands on top of this process of evolution, that has been discarded. They have the Bush, I believe, models, where we are in one spot of this mess, where everybody's doing his thing within who knows where it's going. It's a mass of evolution or evolutions in the plural. So the human fades into the beastly, or the subhuman, or we can't speak about it anymore as subhuman because you don't know if it's what's up or what's down anymore, what's left or right. And I found it best to speak to children of the crucial distinction between man and beast as pertaining to the logos of man distinguished from the communication that we find in animals that are not human. And that pertains precisely to the question of questions and answers. The human being, or the logos of the human being, the logos that defines the human being, not the other way around, by the way, is a logos that begins with a question, which is an opening, which is a going behind or beyond appearances. So the human being as such lives onto what is behind, what is beyond. He doesn't exist in time. He exists between the temporal and the eternal. In this respect, he goes behind. So to speak, for us to communicate, to transact, another community, communicate, to have an exchange, is for us to always bother each other into questioning each other, but not perversely, but for the sake of seeing what's behind, and not in the psychological modern sense of, not looking at what is being said, but always finding some kind of a worm hidden.
Which is not a question, because
No,
it's
that's
a
rhetorical.
priori answer.
Yeah, that's inquisitorial. It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the Inquisition. And the worst of the Inquisition.
Right, but it's an a priori decision or judgment about what is behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which then, by a sophistic logic, explains.
Yeah, you want to explain it away.
Right.
So finally, you can get rid of the finger. You say, "Well, I saw something. There's a problem there." No. Your problem is the finger. You cut it off, and that's it. We solved the problem. You are the problem in this sense. So, and then of course medication and so forth. So this is even worse than medieval Inquisition. No, this is really about the human being, what he is, and what he's all about. Whereas other animals, other life forms, in other words, literally, they don't ask questions. They don't go beyond the appearance. They're about appearance. They live within the realm of appearances. Ooh, they make sounds, that's fine. They can articulate them. They can even parrot the human being, but that's all about what is given. Maybe they want to grab something. They want the food, but it's there. They don't look behind the food to say, why? This why, terrible question. They're even, when they have these experiments with monkeys, supposedly showing that they're like us, right? And then the monkey has to figure out, how do I get the banana? But it's always target, not a dispassionate, disinterested why, because he's not really after the why. He's after the banana and nothing else, not the meaning of the banana. Instead, the human being is a failure. He's a failed monkey. Either he's a failed monkey or he's not a monkey at all. It's not about the banana, because he stops and he wonders. And the baby, you can't leave him on his own, the human baby, because he's not really about grabbing. He's about asking. He's about looking beyond survival. Beyond survival. I once wrote, and I don't know, it is typical to hear people saying that men always fight for power. Nonsense. We fight for what we believe is right. Then if you believe ultimately that you're so corrupt as a human being, and it can be shown to be the case, that you believe that what you're really about is power, whatever that, in other words, appearances, something you can grab on, and that's your problem. But that's a corruption of your original inclination, your original life. So, if we don't go back to this is not a question of having to fantasize about the past and going back to 1846 or 200 BC. It's a question of getting back to concrete life. What are we all about? What have we always been all about? as human beings. As long as we trust these new doctrines that eclipse the problems that they had first set out to supposedly resolve. They obscure them. They didn't resolve them, they obscure them. And so they leave us in confusion. We are no longer helped being educated to discover ourselves, our dignity. Schools are there to integrate us in this new society. And so they cripple us. They cripple our development as human beings. That's the first act of violence.
But what motivates that?
About the interest of the new tower.
But what is that about? In what way is that a human manifestation? In what way is that a question in the human sense?
You mean the tower being a question?
Well, I mean, no, the tower is it's a human manifestation. So how, you see what I'm saying?
No.
I mean, these aren't creatures from Mars.
No, but how do you go from this openness to what transcends power to a closure upon power? The mistaking of appearances for what we're ultimately about and what we ultimately want. Is this the question? How do we get here? How do we end up? But I mean, even look at the Bible. I mean, how do you end up working for in building this Tower of Babel?
Or being a good citizen of Sodom.
Yeah. Completely closed to ends that transcend whether it's the building or the enjoyment of power. Sodom, the building of the society that is cut off from transcendent points of reference, or simply the banquet in which the great feast in which everybody is destroying himself because it's suicidal. It's burning. It's burning not because a god from Ex Machina throws the fire on them, but it's because it's actually burning itself to ashes. It's destroying itself. I think so. Again, Augustine. I mean, there's these two ways. I mean, one way is the way of you could. I think we're entitled to speak of it in terms of the way of civilization, and the other way is the way that ends up in that's the wrong way. It ends up in it's doomed. It ends up in self-destruction. It is the Faustian dream in many respects.
So the tower, what some people call the cathedral, or this emerging global elite, it's equivalent to the Tower of Babel. It's equivalent to Nimrod.
Well, people are babbling, that's for sure.
But is there any difference, or is it really equivalent? Is it simply equivalent? Is Mark Zuckerberg Nimrod?
Ah, there's many of them. Well, it's hyper technological. Um,
Well, building a tower to heaven is also pretty technological. I mean, it's techne anyway.
yeah, no, there is. I think first of all, it is important to draw a distinction between techne and technology. Techne is about finding the tools to solve our problems. So that in the Tower of Babel, and what is their problem? They're conscious first of all of the God out there, and they're building this tower so that they're protected from this. They're not
Well,
exposed to punishment anymore. They're solving their
they want
problem.
they want to get up there and defeat God.
Yeah, but I don't look at again. It's with all of his of the problems inherent in Dostoevsky. I'll refer back to this because I already did, and to clarify, uh, Dostoevsky points out that socialism. First of all, he relates socialism to the Tower of Babel, and he stresses that the Tower of Babel was not a project to reach the heavens as much as a project of building a society independent of the heavens. So it's as if I were wanting to paint the ceilings of my castle the color of the heavens. So now I don't need, I replace. So art that replaces the ultimate reality. This is close to this point is particularly pertinent to the development of the arts in the modern world, where we seek to, you know, Picasso, I don't look for truth, I find it. And you know, this is it. There's no openness to divine transcendence. Zero. This is Napoleon taking his crown and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the idea that the truth is generated by the proto philosopher of the future, the that all truth is, that's the contemporary art doctrine, that anything worthwhile is something that's within ourselves. It's the surrealist idea. It's going to come out if we let our creativity flow. We will generate this new thing, which is a priori good.
Okay, but where is it flowing into? It's flowing into the new society, not into God.
Yeah, right.
So that's the recipient. That's the recipient.
Right.
And so Dali, yeah, talking about surreal, Dali knew that his audience was not God and the court of angels. He knew that it was a crowd of idiots who were just wanted fetishes, and he's given it to them. So you know, it's obviously that's the link.
Yeah,
link.
Right. Dali is exploiting that situation, but the doctrine of surrealism, which is the basic doctrine of contemporary art, that creativity, which equals the good, is somehow inherent in ourselves and will be revealed by the flow of creativity. And I don't think it's conceived of as flowing. Well, I guess it is. It flows into and in a certain way molds the new society, or at least and the new society is the possibility of each person's flowing creativity.
Yes, we're all how beautiful. We're all expressing ourselves. And of course, this is a gimmick. This is a fraud, because as soon as everybody is atomistically talk about Dali and the atomistic man, as soon as everybody is an atom expressing himself, well,
that's the Tower of Babel. All the languages we no longer speak the same language. Each person is speaking their own language, and society is completely exploded.
Well, that has to happen.
And we have, we very concretely, there's now two languages. There's the language of the Democrats and the language of the Trumpists. That's a very crude example.
Mhm.
but there's no longer any possibility of their understanding each other.
There's also concessions, and there's also mix-ups, and
Well, yeah, I mean, it's,
a lot of they share many things. But
yes.
that being said, if we don't return to this notion of an essential discrepancy between two paths of life, so a path that is at least open, right, as in the story of Sodom, at least open to what is transcendent, and so to a life, to getting back on track with a little community. Give me at least 10 people in the city of Sodom, right? At least 10, because then you can build something up on 10, not 3, not 6, not even 9. He stops at 10. He says, okay, give me 10. So if you got 10, we can work with that. But that's sort of the justification for the existence of Sodom. Without these 10, without this openness, it'll just fall apart. So we have a discourse and a party, as it were, and not merely in political terms in those technical sense, but one path that is open to that possibility, and certainly who doesn't demonize the notion of a return, however that is conceived, and another party for which any kind of return is preposterous. We must go on full steam, 100%, and leave nothing behind. Carry everything, to transform everything. Transform, and it's a mandate, and everything will be mandatory at that point for the sake of this new that has nothing old to it. The old has to be completely converted into the new. That's not very Catholic as a notion, where at least they allow the old has to stay there.
Well, the old wasn't so viciously corrupt, or wasn't viewed as so viciously corrupt, because
It was good. It
the
was
old,
good. It was good back then. It was still good.
yeah, I the pious pagans and the God somehow uh, being behind everything in
But
any
I
case.
also meant the so-called Old Testament.
Oh, sure.
Both,
Well,
both.
but Jesus was specific about that. He said, I haven't come to change a word of the law.
Yeah. And Paul, your forefather, the law is good.
Yeah.
He's clear about it.
Yeah.
Even though,
And all the Psalms,
yeah,
which were taken over completely by the church,
okay.
your path, your law.
Well, not today. So, if to get back to your question, the distinction between the old Tower of Babel and today's, in the old one, first of all, it's a vision that we're given. We don't know of any physical Tower of Babel that was built, but it is, for us and for all intents and purposes, it is a story, a warning. It is a literary warning for all times, and even, of course, for ours. It is a warning. It is a warning that shows that this project is doomed. Was there corruption in the ancient world? Sure. But I don't think you could have the degree of corruption that you can have today. And that has been made possible by technology. I refer to the distinction between techne and technology. Yeah?
Yeah.
Techne
Yeah.
is about finding a hammer. Yeah? About finding a
Yeah.
hammer to fix your, and whatever other tool, a technique perhaps to fix your roof.
Yeah.
Technology is not that. It doesn't help you deal with your ends. It is there to modify your ends, to transform your ends, not just, it doesn't just provide means, it provides ends, new ends that may, in fact, obscure your original ones. So you end up in a world where you're pursuing things that distract you from your real proposition there. That's what you really wanted, but you're taken away from it. And now all of a sudden, this sort of trickles down into absurd situations where you have people getting PhD in means, pure means, alienated at a far remove from any original meaning. They're completely empty. This is
At what point does technology? I mean, even historically, more exactly. I mean, not in World War II. Not in World War II when we were when we were building bombers and atom bombs. That was to get on top of our enemies.
Yeah.
So it happens what after 1990? No, when this one world domination becomes possible, or
okay, but you're considering the manifestations, the vulgar manifestations, but the notion of, you don't have to speak about technology as formatted term, but the problem of modern technology, as opposed to techne or art, as a matter of fact, is a problem that is coeval with the early modern revolution. In this, it also can be considered in terms of the distinction of the transition from alchemy to chemistry. Alchemy is a primarily contemplative enterprise and pursuit. Chemistry has taken away the al, has taken away this transcendent dimension. And so it is all about manipulating and reconstructing ends, because there's no natural end or natural good, original good to return to.
but
Or it's even conceived in terms of a vortex. I mean, there's nothing original to return to.
But isn't the transcendent aspect of alchemy, it's a little ridiculous. I mean, it's not like, you can't quite compare it. I mean, is it the best example? But aren't we talking more about the difference between ancient philosophy and modern philosophy? Aren't we talking about the Machiavellian tipping point?
Yeah, but this is not far from Machiavelli, and Machiavelli is not far from alchemy. We're speaking about alchemic processes here. We're speaking about, for instance, placing political idealism on the foundation of materialism, or that is to say, of philosophical materialism.
Well, so sure.
We have this is closely related to the transition from, or rather the leap from alchemy to chemistry.
Yeah, except I don't want to get hung up on alchemy, but
yeah.
The idea
it's almost pre-Socratic philosophy. It's philosophy of nature. It is philosophy of nature in the old. It is perhaps post-Stoic, but still, it is related to Democritus in this sense of, just think about Democritus considering reality. What is it all about? Yeah, what is void? What is void? It is a profoundly philosophical problem. And atoms are not in space. I mean, they're not. They have atomos. Yeah, it has no space. Therefore, it must be a mental entity, pretty much. And he cannot be an idiot to have not thought that this has so. And void, what is the void? So this is a very deep philosophical, or rather sophistic problem, pre-philosophical perhaps, or philosophical in the sense of the pre-Socratics problem. And all of this is related to this. So, but more importantly, the new Tower of Babel has this innovation, which is critical. It is not, first of all, this vision that was, you could consider a literary vision, that is a warning against the attempt to realize it, and nobody had attempted to realize it earlier, because nobody, let's say the philosophers had not stepped out to say, you know what, we won't. Of course, you cannot realize the Tower of Babel unless it's done on the basis of a philosophical materialism. Now we set in motion progress, which is to say, this getting everybody involved and transforming the world. Now we're giving you the blueprints to a new world. This is the realization of Babel beyond any ancient expectations. I don't think the ancients were really worried too much about people actually building this tower that reaches, so to speak, the heavens. In other words, that they can really dispense with, for example, with religion. But the moderns do aspire to that, and they really do think that it's possible to realize it, thanks to this key innovation that has to do with the transition from alchemy to chemistry.
There's the moral aspect, because they're being very nasty about it. They're condemning any resistance with all kinds of as depraved in all different kinds of ways.
Sure,
and
they have to. They have to. Something's wrong with you. If you don't join in, something must be wrong with you, properly, because they have already decided there is nothing important left behind. So what's the point? And you're turning around, Hansel, and looking back. There's nothing at home, there's no home to return to. So you're just fooling around, and we must hurry, because it's an imperative, a moral imperative, this universal responsibility that schools help us appreciate from an earlier age. We must join, and of course, expressive behavior and so forth, and joining the rules, the learning all the regulations and being quick about it, and learn but not think about what you're learning, so forth. No one should be left behind. We're at a point where about 15 years ago, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I suppose, I was in an environment, in an academic environment, where I got in trouble with some big name in the department. And I went to the director to explain the situation when I was called upon to do so. And I told him, well, look, I'm not looking for trouble. All I very politely and humbly asked was that we keep that little golden window open to the possibility that, with respect to what we're doing, we're not absolutely right. And Pontius Pilate answered, Well, Marco, you are very optimistic. So that was that. And I was kicked out almost. Well, almost. So, okay. Of course they don't want anybody left behind. But that's why they have drones. That's why they need 5G. They want everything digitalized. That's why scholarship is all about historicism in the bureaucratic sense. In France, for instance, if you go to university, for the most part, in the so-called humanities or the sciences humaines, um, uh, it's about going to the catalogs and records, and it's very bureaucratic. Um, Cataloging and of course digitalization of everything. Now that can be very handy if I'm referring to Dante's comedy and I forget the number of the verse, but it's in a context that is dehumanizing and certainly against Dante in that case and against the pursuit. So it's pretty gruesome, but absolutely it's Stalinistic with on steroids. It has to be that way.
But so the Tower of Babel is being built, and we have gotten to the point where we're no longer understanding each other.
It's
We're
falling
being
apart.
dispersed.
It's falling apart, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's falling apart. In spite of, you know, they're rushing to build and to get more sophisticated. But the more sophisticated you get, and that's the moral of the story of the fable, as it were, is that the more sophisticated you get, the more alienated you are from um, discourse where people understand each other. Nobody understands each other anymore. So the other. Um, so what happens? How can you contain this? Drones
But
alone
that
won't
is
be able
not
to solve it.
that isn't going to stop them from uh, having this globalized control. We may be dispersed. We may be less and less capable of communicating with each other.
Yeah. No.
But that is not going to slow down
No.
this juggernaut of technological control.
Well, you either have a situation described by Aldous Huxley, where there's just a few who just miss taking the pill and end up in caves as savages, and of course, um, keeping in mind Huxley's critique of that, namely the fact that there's going to be a rational alternative, always a rational alternative to Stalinism. It's not just savage. Um, or you end up with barbaric behavior everywhere, and I don't think machines alone, robots or whatever you want to call them, will be able to contain that. The violent behavior, it doesn't have to be manifest yet, but it's definitely what people are being raised for. Good music, good painting may not be indispensable for the building of a bridge today, but it is indispensable to avoid that tomorrow crowds of thugs will demolish all the bridges. So when children today are raised not with Bach, not being exposed to Corelli, but to absolute rubbish, rap or other forms of degeneration that we have had in the recent years, and visually to the children of, or the stepchildren of Picasso, we are raising ticking bombs. These children will grow up and they will be extremely frustrated with living in Brave New World and following directives, because there is the problem of nature, of human nature, and you can't demolish that. That's sad. You can't help that. You can cripple human nature, but you cannot eradicate it. You cannot eliminate it. It's there, you're crippling it, and this will mean violence, explosion, barbaric explosion. And you have signs here and there today. And I just mean signs. It's not going to work. Just as it never worked to try to get rid of religion from the secular world, so-called secular world. They didn't do that. They didn't get rid of it. They got rid of it in there where it was possible, but where religion had already prostituted itself, but not where religion stood independently of modernity. And so with Christianity, in many respects, it worked, especially early forms of Christianity. So, but they certainly were not able to domesticate Islam, for instance, which does not conceive itself, does not think of itself as tied to the elements that make up the modern world. So they can set themselves apart and can say, hey, I'm here. Now, I don't want to be swallowed up by you. Maybe I will tame you, not the other way around. How's that? Let's play that game. Huh? It's a war. So I think that's a complete failure. That was a complete failure. And they could just pretend that it's okay. But even in France now, they're have to shut the mosques down. They're as if they just woke up. But that was a complete failure. And for that, in some respect, we can be grateful to the Muslims who have reminded these globalists that their project is doomed. But of course, they keep shoving that news aside and pretending that we can find maybe another way to handle them.
But in a sense, we might ally ourselves to the Muslims the way America allied itself with Russia in 1942.
That's pretty Machiavellian. Machiavelli. I mean, okay, there's consider Islam, for example. Last week I was at the park with my children, and I met a fellow who was feeding the ducks, and we started speaking. And he turns out he was from Algeria. He had had all kinds of physical ailments, and had recovered. And one thing that led to another. He was not wearing a mask, by the way. Guess he didn't care about ducks.
Just as an aside, when I've been in Ivry, which has large sections which are completely black, no one's wearing a mask.
Okay. Well, like there.
Not in the main sections, but in the,
Right.
no.
Right. Yeah.
So, but go on. So
Bunch of
one thing led to
misfits.
another.
Yeah. So there. Well, I wasn't either, as a matter of fact.
Mhm.
But there we started speaking. Well, he raised.
Uh, Marco, people should understand that mask wearing is obligatory almost everywhere in
Yeah, in the
France,
park. Yeah, in
all
the
the
park.
time.
We have a huge park here in the
Mm,
city, and you could be in the
mm.
middle of the prairie with, nobody's around you, 100, 200 meters all around you, and yet, and they have these patrols going around the park, patrols regularly. Now, the funny thing is that, um,
Forcing people to put masks on.
yeah, no, they go with the speakers. They come in with a speaker, American style, um, uh, with a warning. You are infringing upon, I don't know, whatever the regulations.
You are
Wear your
endangering
mask.
your fellow citizens.
Yes, you're endangering the world. Now cover your face. Um, and what happens is the very few people who don't wear anything, they oblige. They put it on. The police leaves and they take it off. It just because after all, you could be eating, and if you're eating, that means that you don't have to be wearing it. And I could be eating anything. So if somebody stops you, you just have to. I'm eating. I'm eating. I mean, actually had an undercover policeman in the street. We were at a street light. He actually stopped me. I was with my kids, taking my kids to school, and he actually told me, "Sir, you don't have a mask. I don't need to tell you that I'm an undercover policeman." And I said, "No, I'm eating. I'm still eating." Well, normally you put it on, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that what they primarily want to see is whether you are, um, um, aggressive
uh,
or not, uh, dangerous.
Submissive. Right.
Yeah, yeah. You have to be submissive. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Compliant.
Submission.
Yeah, but it is a symbol of. So okay, as long as you tell me, that's what counts.
Right.
After all, what I wear is sort of a mosquito net, so it doesn't really, and they accept it. It's just again a symbol of submission. Well, where was I? So the guy in the park who wasn't
Well, so,
wearing.
right.
So the guy in the park, he
Right.
raised some theological questions. Let me just put it that way. And at some point, realizing that I was not really a Muslim, not really, I mean, not technically a Muslim, although I was speaking in terms that made sense to him. He referred to Islam as accepting Mary and Jesus. It was wonderful. Jesus died on the cross. I think I had already shown him a picture of the Jesus drawing, yeah, that I with the betrayal of Jesus, where he's nailed by um, needles, right, the syringes, and
Nailed to the cross with syringes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a drawing you made.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Syringes that are produced by the Tower of Babel.
Right.
So the Enterprise, compliments of the snake. So he tells me, yes, but we don't really accept that he's a son. It makes no sense that he's Jesus, the Son of God. But why do I raise this issue? It's because it didn't take me more than 30 seconds to pull back, as it were, and to fall into perplexity, perhaps. In any case, the incapacity to repeat what he's used to repeating as same old, story. It makes no sense to speak about the Son of God. And I said, well, look, or Mary being a, yeah, we say that she was a virgin, but and so I simply drew his attention to a problem, a literalist problem. Trust the proposition, that's fine, but not as an end in itself. Trust the proposition so that you may understand the meaning, the message. So if the text says there's a Son of God, then you ask yourself, why? What's the point? What's the message of the proposition? And then I gave him sort of an account of things, of propositions that made sense and that he could actually accept to some extent, because he's not used to giving so much credit to the human being's capacity to partake in thinking, in divine thinking. So thinking about these things is seen in a genuinely human manner, is seen as problematic, still seen as problematic, dangerous, yeah, and potentially a threat to the establishment of the religion of the true God. The element of the human participation in divine thinking is still seen a bit as
Well,
a problem.
Marco, what did you say to him?
Well, I was speaking as I would to my children. I mean, in common sense, and in other words, very, very down to earth. What could it mean to say that the Son? What could it mean to speak about the Son of God if the God is, if the Son is the Logos builds out of the nomos, also the nous, the mind, and he speaks, and then of course he is born within the purity of nature, Mary, and so why is it why this whole story about the Immaculate? Why do we have to stress that she's immaculate? Well, it's precisely to show against, for example, the Gnostics, that nature is not evil or bad or dirty, that the body is originally clean. And in Mary, in the person of Mary, we see this, that the body is a perfect, the human body is a perfect cradle for the birth of Logos as the word of God, and the word that is springing from God, so that ultimately, and he appreciated very much my reference to human life as being a life of witnessing and of confidence in our capacity also. But I mean,
wait, I didn't catch that. A life of what?
Witnessing. The human man is a witness to truth. Now, of course, he's prompt in saying truth is Allah. Yeah, okay, the strong God, literally. Okay, so but he hesitates to give credit to the human being. That was the point I raised just now. But so and that's why it can be difficult to have collaboration. You were mentioning collaboration. It doesn't have to be cynical collaboration or on the level of realpolitik, Machiavellic. No, it could be earnest, definitely, but it's still going to be difficult because the main problem with Islam, I think, from a genuinely human so-called perspective, in other words, with respect to the human being, for goodness sake, is that it's fine where we have hordes of tribes that need to be organized and ordered, and where they're not going to listen to anything but the iron fist, as it were. But it's not that great for philosophers and for the human being as such he finds himself it's a bit demeaning for that human being. So that's why I think that, I mean, for everyone to convert to Islam, I mean, aside from it's not going to happen, but it wouldn't really be a solution. Wouldn't really be a
Yeah.
solution. It's
But Marco, one last thing maybe. The essence of being a human being, witnessing, questioning,
mm,
is witnessing a simple prelude to questioning,
mm,
or is there a difference there?
mm.
Is there a tension there?
Well, it wouldn't be too improper to say that we can witness through and in the very act of questioning. And what occurs when we question? The old philosophers were seeking God. Old Christianity tells us the pagans were seeking God, and in the person of, for instance, of Plato, had discovered God somehow in their own way. But it's still not clear, they said, because it's the God that is hidden in the human nature somehow, yeah, that they discovered, not the one that is revealed outside and above it. Okay. But that's the prelude, as it were, to the coming of the new God, right? Or rather of the coming out of God as being standing over and above the human. The prelude is a recognition of the inherence of God within. So now, all of a sudden, you need both to establish civilization, Christian civilization. You need both elements. You need God hidden and God that came out. And this link between the two is what is sustaining us, our civilization.